They say money reveals who people truly are. When Julian threw me out of our penthouse into the Chicago blizzard, he thought he was clearing the way for his $33 million empire. He laughed as I shivered, thinking he had won. But he forgot one tiny detail about the contract he signed in his greed. He might hold the pen, but I own the ink, and he is about to learn exactly who he really works for. My name is Elena. I stood on the frozen pavement outside the Ariston, the biting wind of a Chicago December whipping my hair across my face. My open suitcase lay upside down on the salted concrete, my sweaters and underwear scattered like debris from a crash. The physical cold was agonizing, sharp enough to make my teeth chatter violently, but it was nothing compared to the glacial indifference staring down at me from the warmth of the lobby. Julian stood behind the glass doors. He looked magnificent and terrible. He was wearing the charcoal Italian suit I had saved for 6 months to buy him, skipping lunches and walking to work so he could look the part of a CEO for his pitch meetings. In his hand, he swirled a glass of amber scotch, the expensive kind he used to say we could never afford. Behind him, my mother-in-law, Sylvia, and his brother, Marcus, were huddled together, their faces illuminated by the glow of a smartphone. Marcus was holding the phone up, laughing as he panned the camera from Julian's smug face down to me, shivering in the snow. I could practically hear the notifications pinging. They were live streaming this. Julian! I screamed, my voice cracking against the wind. I stepped forward, my boots crunching on the ice. Please, it is 10 degrees out here. You cannot do this. Julian pushed the door open just an inch. The heat from the lobby rushed out, teasing me. I can do whatever I want. Elena, he said, his voice smooth and detached. I am a very rich man now. 10 years, I cried out, tears freezing on my cheeks. I gave you 10 years of my life. I worked 3 jobs so you could build Vanguard. I sold my mother's necklace to keep you out of jail. He took a sip of his drink and smirked. And you were useful then. But look at you. You are worn out. I have just closed a deal for $33 million. I need a wife who fits the part. You are just baggage. The door opened wider, and a waft of expensive perfume hit me before I saw her. Isabella, the 22-year-old intern I had trained on how to use the filing system. She stepped out and wrapped her arm around Julian's waist. My breath hitched in my throat. She was wearing my vintage fox fur coat, the one I had found at an estate sale and cherished for special occasions. Babe, it is cold, Isabella whined, nuzzling into the shoulder of the suit I bought. Close the door. She is making the property look trashy. Julian reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple gold band. It was the ring we bought at a pawn shop a decade ago. He looked at it with a sneer, then flicked his wrist. The ring spun through the air and disappeared into a snowbank. The divorce papers will be at the shelter by tomorrow morning, Julian said. Do not bother looking for a settlement. The company owns everything now, including the shirt on your back. You get 0%. The heavy glass doors slammed shut. I heard the lock click. I stood there, paralyzed, until a heavy hand touched my shoulder. It was Frank, the night doorman. I had knitted a scarf for his daughter last Christmas. He looked at me with pity, but he kept his hand on his radio. Mrs. Vance. I am so sorry, Frank muttered, looking down at his boots. But Mr. Vance, he says you are trespassing. He told me to call the police if you are not off the private grounds in 5 minutes. Please, do not make me do it. I nodded slowly. I understood. Hierarchy was everything in this city. I bent down, my fingers numb and clumsy, and shoved my wet clothes back into the broken suitcase. I did not have the strength to zip it. I dragged it behind me, the wheels rattling over the uneven ice. I walked away from the light of the building, into the suffocating darkness of the street. I pulled my phone from my pocket. The screen flashed a low battery warning. 10% remaining. I opened my banking app, praying for a miracle. $0. Account frozen. Julian had not just divorced me, he had erased me. I huddled on a bus stop bench a few blocks away from the Ariston, pulling my knees to my chest in a futile attempt to preserve body heat. The wind howled through the plexiglass shelter, sounding like a mournful ghost. It was the same sound I heard 10 years ago outside the university library, the night I first spoke to him. Back then, Julian was just a boy with holes in his sneakers and a fire in his eyes that I mistook for passion. He had charm, certainly. He could talk a professor into extending a deadline or convince a bartender to give him free drinks, but he lacked the spine to carry the weight of his own dreams. I was the one who stayed up until 3 a.m, rewriting his business ethics essays because his logic was flawed. I was the one who organized his chaotic notes into coherent project proposals. I looked down at my left hand. The skin was red and chapped from the cold, and the pale band of skin where my ring used to be felt like a phantom limb. We got married at City Hall on a Tuesday because it was the cheapest option. My mother-in-law, Sylvia, refused to help pay for a ceremony. She claimed it was because they were tight on cash, but I heard what she whispered to Marcus in the hallway. She is an orphan. Marcus. She has no lineage, no people. Why should we spend good money on a girl who comes from nowhere? I swallowed that insult just like I swallowed every failure that followed. And there were so many failures. Julian launched 4 companies in 8 years. A tech consulting firm, a dropshipping business, a crypto mining operation, and a luxury car rental service. They all imploded. He was the visionary, he said, so he could not be bothered with the boring details like taxes, payroll, or overhead costs. I became the engine that kept his delusions running. For the last decade, I worked 3 jobs, by day. I managed logistics for a trucking company, dealing with angry drivers and missed shipments, by evening. I tutored high school kids in calculus, and late at night, while Julian snored. I did freelance graphic design work until my eyes burned. I remembered a dinner from 2 years ago. Sylvia and Marcus had come over, uninvited as usual. I had cooked a pot roast, buying the meat from the discount bin because the rent was due. "This meat is tough," Sylvia had said, dropping her fork onto the plate with a loud clatter. "Julian, darling, you look thin. Is she not feeding you properly?" I had gripped the edge of the table, my knuckles white. "We are on a strict budget, Sylvia. The rental business is struggling." Julian had slammed his hand on the table. "Stop it, Elena. Stop embarrassing me in front of my family. You always have to bring up money. You are so negative." Later that night, while I was washing the dishes they left behind, he came up behind me. "I am doing this for us." "Elena," he had said, his voice dropping to that manipulative whisper I learned to dread, "I am going to be a millionaire. You suffer a little now. So what? Do not be so selfish. You need to support my vision." I supported it. I supported it until I had nothing left. The memory that hurt the most, the one that made me gasp for air in the freezing bus shelter, was the day he got arrested for minor fraud. He had fudged the numbers on a loan application. He called me from the station, weeping, "Elena, please, I cannot stay in here." He had sobbed, "Get me out." I did not have the cash, so I went to a pawn shop downtown and sold the silver locket my mother had left me. It was the only thing I had of hers. It contained a tiny picture of her holding me as a baby. I got $2,000 for it. I bailed him out, and he never even asked how I got the money. Everything changed 6 months ago. That was when he came home with the idea for Vanguard Energy. For the first time, he was not manic. He was quiet. He was focused. "This is it, Elena," he had told me, his eyes gleaming with a cold, hard light. "Solar energy storage. This is the one." I should have known then. I should have seen that he was finally ready to succeed, and that his success would require one final sacrifice. Me. The irony of Julian's newfound fame as a tech genius was that he could barely operate a thermostat, let alone engineer a renewable energy grid. The world saw him as the visionary behind Vanguard Energy, but the reality was buried in the hard drive of my battered laptop, password protected and hidden under a folder named Grocery Lists. Julian had the charisma, but he lacked the cognitive architecture for complex systems. He thought the solar market was about panels. I knew, from 10 years of managing supply chains and rerouting freight trains at 2 in the morning, that the real money was in storage logistics. I found the gap in the market that he was too blind to see. I wrote every word of the business plan. I designed the operational structure. I built the financial models that projected the profit margins. I did it all while he slept, and I put his name on the cover page because I believed that if he won, we won. But as soon as the project gained traction, the walls went up. "You need to rest, Elena," he had told me 3 months ago, blocking the doorway to the home office. "You look exhausted. Let me handle the investors. They want to see a strong male lead. It is just business." That was when he hired Isabella. She was introduced as an image consultant, a title as vague as it was insulting. She was 22, with skin that had never known stress and hands that had never scrubbed a toilet. I started finding things. A receipt for a suite at the Hyatt in his jacket pocket. A long blonde hair on the passenger seat of our Honda. When I brought it up, the gaslighting was immediate and brutal. "You are sick, Elena," Julian had sneered, throwing the receipt into the trash. "That was for a client meeting. You are so insecure it is pathetic. Do you want to ruin this for me? Is that it?" Sylvia had chimed in during Sunday dinner, shaking her head as she cut into the roast chicken I paid for. "It is jealousy, plain and simple. You cannot stand that Julian is finally becoming someone, so you invent these stories. You should be medicated." I started to believe them. I thought maybe the stress was making me hallucinate. Maybe I was the problem. The breaking point came 1 week ago. Julian came home, his face flushed with adrenaline, and announced that a mysterious angel investor had agreed to acquire the technology. $33 million, he had whispered, the number rolling off his tongue like a prayer. "They are buying the proprietary tech. We are going to be rich." My heart had soared. I thought the struggle was finally over. I thought my sleepless nights were finally paying off. "I will get my suit ready," I had said, reaching for his hand. "I cannot wait to meet them." "I want to explain the logistics algorithm to the board." Julian had pulled his hand away as if I burned him. He looked me up and down, his eyes lingering on my faded sweater and my hair, which I had cut myself to save money on a salon. "You are not going, Elena," he said coldly. "What but?" I wrote the plan. I built Vanguard. "And you look like a maid," he snapped. "This is a $33 million signing ceremony. Do you have any idea how bad you would make the company look? You are too country. You are outdated." He grabbed my arm and led me to the bedroom. I thought he was going to apologize. Instead, he took the key from the top of the doorframe. "Stay here," he commanded. "Do not come out until I get back. I cannot risk you ruining this with your awkwardness." He locked the door. I did not scream. I did not bang on the wood. I was too broken. I sat on the edge of the bed for an hour, staring at the wall. Then, like the well-trained fool I was, I remembered his shirt needed pressing. I unlocked the door from the inside with a bobby pin, a trick I learned living in foster care fetched the iron, and went back into the room. I ironed his white dress shirt until it was crisp and perfect. I cried the whole time, my tears leaving tiny, damp spots on the cotton that I quickly dried with the hot iron. I told myself that once the check cleared, once the stress was gone, he would be the man I loved again. I handed him the shirt through the crack in the door when he returned to get dressed. I never saw the investor. I never saw the contract. I just stayed in the room, praying that $33 million would be enough to buy back my husband's heart. I was so stupid. 3 days had passed since Julian threw me into the snow. I was currently rotting in a motel room on the outskirts of Cicero that smelled of stale cigarettes and despair. My body was waging a war against itself. The fever from that night had spiked, leaving me shivering violently under a thin, scratchy blanket while sweat plastered my hair to my forehead. I had no medicine. I had no food. All I had was the flickering television set bolted to the wall, offering a window into the life that had been stolen from me. The breaking news banner flashed in urgent red tech visionary Julian Vance closes historic deal. I watched through a haze of fever as Julian stood on a podium, bathed in the flashing lights of camera crews. He looked golden, untouchable. His arm was wrapped tight around Isabella's waist. She was wearing a white dress that looked suspiciously like the one I had pinned on my Pinterest board for our vow renewal ceremony. "It was not easy," Julian said to the reporter, flashing that charming, practiced smile. "But true innovation requires a unique vision. I spent sleepless nights building the architecture of Vanguard Energy. And I could not have done it without the support of the incredible woman beside me." He squeezed Isabella's hip. She beamed, playing the role of the devoted partner perfectly, even though she could not spell photovoltaic if her life depended on it. Then, the camera cut to a pre-recorded interview with Sylvia. My mother-in-law sat in her living room, dabbing at dry eyes with a handkerchief. "We are just relieved it is over," Sylvia said, her voice trembling with fake emotion. That woman, Elena, she was a leech. She never worked a day in her life. She spent my son's hard-earned money on luxuries while he slaved away, and then we found out she was seeing other men. It broke Julian's heart, but he is strong. We had to remove the toxicity from our lives. I gasped, the air catching in my raw throat. "Liar," I whispered to the empty room. "You are a liar." I grabbed my phone to check the social media feeds. It was a massacre. Strangers were tearing me apart in the comments. "Gold digger, cheater, trash. Glad she is on the streets." The injustice was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest until I could not breathe. I curled into a ball. I wanted to close my eyes and never wake up. What was the point of fighting? I had no money, no reputation, and no family. Julian had won. Suddenly, my phone buzzed against the nightstand. The screen lit up. I stared at it through blurry eyes. It was an unknown number, but the caller ID displayed a name that made my heart stop. Sterling and Partners. I hesitated. My thumb hovered over the decline button. I assumed it was Julian's lawyers calling to threaten me again. But something, maybe a shred of the instinct that had kept me alive this long, made me swipe right. "Hello?" I croaked, my voice sounding wrecked. "Hello." "Elena," a voice replied. It was a woman's voice, deep, authoritative, and unmistakably refined. It sounded like old Money and Steel. "This is Victoria Sterling." "I believe we have a debt of gratitude to settle." I sat up, ignoring the dizziness that spun the room around. Victoria Sterling. The name crashed through my memory like a freight train. The angel investor, the person who had just given Julian $33 million. But Julian had told me he dealt with a board of directors. He had never met the chairman. "Mrs. Sterling," I stammered, gripping the phone. I do not understand. Why are you calling me my husband?" "Ex-husband. He just signed with you. He signed a contract with my firm." "Yes," Victoria said, her tone icy when she referred to him, but softening as she spoke to me. "But Julian Vance has never met me. He does not know who I am, but you do. Elena, think back. 15 years ago. The University Ethics Committee." My breath hitched. The memory surfaced, vivid and sharp. I was 19, a scholarship student working in the faculty office to pay for textbooks. A prominent professor had been falsely accused of plagiarism by a jealous rival, Everyone had turned their back on her. But I had found the original time-stamped logs in the server archives that proved her innocence. I had spent 3 nights decoding the data to save her reputation. "Professor Sterling," I whispered. "I go by Victoria now." She said, "I never forgot the student who saved my career when everyone else wanted to bury me. I have been watching you. Elena, I saw your name on the marriage certificate. I saw your handwriting on the business plans Julian submitted, and I saw the security footage of him throwing you out into the snow. You knew I know everything," Victoria replied. "He thinks he sold his company to a faceless conglomerate. He thinks he has won, but he made a mistake. He forgot that the hand that gives can also take away." "Are you ready to remind him who really built that empire?" "Yes," I said, and for the first time in 3 days, I did not feel cold. "Yes, I am." An hour later, a sleek black Mercedes Maybach pulled up to the curb of my dilapidated motel, looking like a diamond resting in a gutter. The driver, a stoic man in a uniform that cost more than my entire wardrobe, held the door open for me. I hesitated, clutching my coat tight around my feverish body, feeling painfully out of place. "Mrs. Vance," he asked, his voice respectful. "Ms. Sterling is waiting." The ride to the city center was silent and smooth. We arrived at the Sterling Group headquarters, a glass monolith that pierced the gray Chicago skyline. I was ushered past security, up a private elevator that made my ears pop, and into a corner office that was larger than the apartment Julian had just thrown me out of. Victoria Sterling stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out over the frozen city. She turned as I entered. At 60, she was more imposing than I remembered. Her silver hair was cut in a sharp bob, and her eyes held the same fierce intelligence that had terrified and inspired me 15 years ago. "It has been a long time. Elena," she said, her voice soft but commanding. "I am sorry we had to meet again under these circumstances. Please, sit. You look like you are about to collapse." I sank into a leather chair, my hands trembling. "You bought Vanguard. You gave Julian $33 million. Victoria smiled, but it was a cold, dangerous smile. She walked to her desk and picked up a thick, bound document. She dropped it in front of me with a heavy thud. "I did not buy Vanguard because of Julian," she said, sitting opposite me. "I bought it because I recognized the writing. I recognized the logic flow in the risk assessment algorithm. It was the same syntax you used in your thesis on supply chain ethics. Julian is a hollow suit. Elena, he talks a good game, but he is empty." I knew he did not write that plan. She tapped the cover of the contract. He was so blinded by the number 33 million that he never read the addendum. It is 200 pages of dense legal text. He just signed on the dotted line. She flipped the document open to a page marked with a red tab. "Secret number 1, she said, pointing to a paragraph. "The original intellectual property clause. It states that if the signatory is found to have misrepresented the authorship of the core technology, the contract does not become void. Instead, ownership of the assets transfers immediately to the holding company, my company, pending an internal investigation." I stared at the words, the legalese blurring before my eyes. "So, you own the tech. It gets better," Victoria continued, flipping to another tab near the back. "Clause 44, Section C, the morality clause. This is standard in high-stakes executive contracts, but Julian was too busy drinking champagne to notice. It stipulates that if the seller engages in public scandal, adultery, or unjust filing of divorce proceedings within 30 days of signing, the payout is frozen and executive control is revoked." She opened a folder on her desk and spread out a series of glossy photographs. My stomach turned. There were high-resolution images of Julian and Isabella entering a hotel room. There was a transcript of text messages. And finally, a still frame from a security camera across the street from the Ariston, showing Julian shoving me into the snowstorm. I had a private investigator on him the moment he approached my firm. Victoria said, I have everything. The adultery, the abuse, the fraud. He thinks he won, I whispered, a mix of shock and vindication rising in my chest. He thinks the money is his. He thinks he sold his company to a faceless investment fund, Victoria corrected me, leaning forward, her eyes locking onto mine. Actually, he sold his soul to me. And I want to give it to you. She slid the contract across the table toward me, along with a heavy fountain pen. We are not just going to take the money back. Elena, she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial level. We are going to take his reputation. We are going to strip him of his arrogance in front of the entire world. But I need you to lead the charge. Are you ready to stop being the victim I looked at the photos of Julian, the man I had sacrificed everything for, the man who had discarded me like trash? The fever in my body seemed to burn away, replaced by a cold, clear rage. I am ready, I said, picking up the pen. Tell me what to do. The next 48 hours were a blur of calculated precision. Victoria Sterling did not just offer me a lifeline. She offered me an army. I was moved from the clinic where I received IV fluids and vitamin boosters to a private suite at the Four Seasons. A team of 5 lawyers, a crisis management publicist, and a personal stylist descended upon me like a tactical unit. We need to erase the victim, the stylist said, looking critically at my long, frizzy hair that Julian always insisted I keep because he liked the traditional look. Cut it, I said, my voice surprising me with its steadiness. Cut it all off. I do not want to look like his wife anymore. I want to look like his boss. When I looked in the mirror 2 hours later, the tired, frumpy housewife was gone. In her place was a woman with a sharp, angular bob and a tailored navy power suit that cost more than my car. My skin, revitalized by the medical treatments, glowed with a new determination. I looked like the logistics executive I was born to be. While I was being reassembled, Victoria's legal team was dissecting Julian's life. We gathered in the conference room, the table covered in blueprints and financial records. He made a critical error in his asset protection strategy. The lead attorney, a sharp man named Mr. Henderson, explained, in order to inflate the company's valuation for the sale, Julian listed all his personal assets as corporate holdings. The penthouse, the Porsche, the credit cards. They are all registered under Vanguard Energy. I looked at the documents and felt a cold smile form on my lips. And since Sterling Group just acquired Vanguard Energy. Exactly. Henderson finished. Technically, you are not just his creditor. You are his landlord. You own the car he drives and the bed he sleeps in. I spent the rest of the night recovering the digital breadcrumbs of my life. I logged into my old cloud accounts, retrieving the original timestamps of the Vanguard business plan. There were emails from 3 years ago, sent from my personal account to Julian, attaching the very spreadsheets he claimed to have invented. I found the chat logs where I explained the battery storage capacity to him like he was a child. Every file was a nail in his coffin. Meanwhile, the private investigator kept the updates coming. He sent a video file to my tablet. I hesitated before pressing play, but I needed to see it. It was footage from inside the penthouse. Julian was throwing a victory party. The music was thumping, and people I did not recognize were drinking champagne out of the crystal flutes my grandmother gave me. "Trash it," I heard Marcus yell. The camera panned to show Julian's brother smashing my ceramic art collection against the fireplace. "We are getting new stuff anyway, rich people stuff." Sylvia was laughing, kicking the shards of pottery with her heel. "Good riddance to that cheap junk." And then there was Isabella. She was hanging off Julian's neck, scrolling through a tablet. "Baby," she whined, her voice grating. "I need another 5,000 transferred to my account. The Birkin bag I want is on resale, and the price is going up. You promised me." "Just put it on the company card." "Babe," Julian slurred, waving his hand dismissively. "We have unlimited funds now. The wire transfer is just a formality." He had no idea. He was spending money he did not have, burning through the small operational advance Victoria had allowed just to give him enough rope to hang himself. Watching them destroy the home I had carefully curated, watching them laugh at my memories. Something inside me finally snapped. The last lingering drop of heartbreak evaporated, leaving only a dry, scorching desert of resolve. I did not feel sad for Julian anymore. I did not feel pity for his inevitable fall. I just wanted it to be swift. I wanted it to be absolute. I turned off the tablet and looked at Victoria. "I am done waiting," I said. Victoria slid a single sheet of paper across the mahogany desk. It was an authorization form. "This grants you full power of attorney over the Vanguard subsidiary," she said. "Once you sign this, you speak for Sterling Group. You have the authority to freeze assets, terminate employment, and seize property." I picked up the heavy Mont Blanc pen. The weight of it felt good in my hand. I did not hesitate. I did not tremble. I signed my name in bold, black ink, Elena Vance. Underneath the signature line, the printed title read, "Special Representative of Sterling Group." "Let us go to work," I said. It was day 7. In the Bible, that was the day of rest. But for me, it was the day the first domino fell. I was sitting in the war room at Sterling Group, an iPad propped up in front of me, monitoring the real-time alerts from the Vanguard corporate accounts. At 2 in the afternoon, the notification I had been waiting for flashed across the screen in bright red. Transaction attempted Tiffany & Co. Amount $52,000. Status declined. Reason account frozen. I allowed myself a sip of coffee. Julian was trying to buy an engagement ring. He was not just moving on, he was trying to replace me with a younger, shinier model before the ink on our divorce papers was even dry. According to the report from the private security detail we had tailing him, Julian made a scene. He screamed at the cashier, threw his platinum card on the glass counter, and demanded they run it again. When it failed a second time, he called the bank, only to be told that the account was under audit lock by order of the new board of directors. 10 minutes later, the phone in the office of the Sterling representative rang. I signaled for the assistant to put it on speaker. "What is the meaning of this?" Julian's voice boomed through the room, distorted by rage. "I am trying to make a purchase, and my card is dead. Do you have any idea who I am? I am the CEO of this company." The assistant, a calm young man named David, looked at me for a cue. I nodded. "Mr. Vance," David said, his voice level and professional. "We have flagged some irregular spending patterns. As per the acquisition agreement, all assets are currently under review." "Review?" Julian sputtered. "I do not need a review. I need my money. Unfreeze it now, or I will walk. Do you hear me? I will take my technology and walk. I am afraid that is not possible, sir," David replied. "However, the chairman of the board has requested your presence tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock sharp to discuss a breach of contract. Please bring legal counsel." "Breach of contract?" Julian laughed, a nervous, arrogant bark. "I am the contract. You tell the chairman that I will be there, and he better be ready to apologize." He hung up. I leaned back in my chair, watching the digital map that tracked his location. He was heading home. Or rather, to the company penthouse he thought was his home. I opened the smart home application on my tablet. I had installed this system myself 3 years ago, programming every light, lock, and thermostat. Julian never bothered to learn the admin password because he said technology was for the help. I saw that Sylvia was currently in the penthouse. The sensors indicated she was in the master bathroom. I tapped the icon for the water heater and swiped the temperature down to 0. Then, I selected the lighting controls for the living room and set them to strobe mode. A few minutes later, the security feed audio picked up a shriek. Julian Sylvia's voice cracked through the speakers. "The water. It is freezing, and the lights are possessing the house. Fix it. I watched the logs as Julian arrived. He tried to unlock the front door with his fingerprint. Access denied. He tried the keypad. Access denied. I could hear him through the doorbell camera. Stupid piece of junk open. I waited 2 full minutes, letting him pound on the door in the hallway, before I remotely unlocked it. He stormed in, blaming the cheap system I had installed, never once suspecting that I was the ghost in the machine. Then came the final blow for the day. Marcus. My brother-in-law had been parading around town in a neon green Lamborghini Urus that he had leased using the company credit line 2 days ago. He was currently parked illegally outside a nightclub in River North. I texted the location to the repossession team we had on standby. An hour later, Marcus burst into the penthouse, looking pale and sweaty. "Julian," he yelled. "The cops. They took the car. They said it was reported as a disputed asset. They left me on the sidewalk. The family gathered in the living room, illuminated by the flickering lights I was still manipulating. They looked terrified. The invincible shield of money was cracking." "Calm down," Julian said, though his voice wavered. He poured himself a drink, but I had already canceled the grocery delivery, so there was no ice. "It is just a glitch. The bank, the house, the car. It is all just a system error. The new owners are probably just updating their servers. Are you sure Sylvia asked, wrapping a towel around her wet hair? It feels personal." "Do not be stupid." "Mom," Julian snapped. "Who would make it personal, Elena? She is probably freezing in a gutter somewhere." "No. This is just corporate bureaucracy. I am the genius who holds the patent. They cannot touch me. Tomorrow morning, I will go in there, yell at some suits, and get everything turned back on." I closed the laptop, a satisfied hum vibrating in my chest. He really believed that. He really believed he was untouchable. "See you at 9 o'clock, Julian," I whispered to the screen. I stood in the heavily soundproofed anteroom adjacent to the main conference hall, watching the security feed on a wall-mounted monitor. It was 9 o'clock in the morning. Julian strutted into the Sterling Group headquarters like a conquering king returning to his castle. He was flanked by his entourage. Isabella was clinging to his arm, wearing oversized sunglasses indoors. Sylvia walked behind them, nose in the air, while Julian's personal lawyer, a sweaty man named Mr. Kornfeld, who charged $200 an hour, trailed in the back, carrying a briefcase that looked too heavy for him. They were ushered into the boardroom. It was a space designed to intimidate, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago skyline and a table long enough to seat 20 people. Julian did not sit in the guest chair. Instead, he walked straight to the head of the table, the seat reserved for the chairman. He sat down, leaned back, and threw his Italian leather shoes right up onto the polished mahogany surface. "Get me a coffee," Julian barked at the empty room, assuming there were invisible servants waiting on his every word. "Black. And tell this representative to hurry up. I have a reservation at Nobu for lunch." Victoria Sterling stood beside me in the anteroom. She adjusted the lapel of her blazer and looked at me. "It is time," she said. I smoothed the front of my suit. It was a stark, brilliant white, a deliberate choice to contrast with the miserable gray rags I had worn the night he kicked me out. My hair was sharp, my makeup was flawless, and my heart was beating with a slow, heavy rhythm of pure vengeance. Victoria pushed the double doors open. She walked in first, her heels clicking rhythmically against the marble floor. Behind her, 4 of the firm's most aggressive litigators marched in formation, followed by 2 broad-shouldered security guards. I walked in last. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. Julian took his feet off the table, but he did not stand up. He looked annoyed. "Finally," Julian scoffed, not looking closely at the group yet. "Do you people have any idea who I am? I just sold you a $33 million company. You do not freeze my accounts. You do not lock my mother out of the bathroom. I want an explanation, and I want it right now. Then," His eyes traveled past Victoria and landed on me. He blinked, he squinted, and then he laughed. It was a cruel, incredulous sound. "Elena," he sputtered, pointing a finger at me. "What the hell are you doing here? Did you follow us, Jesus? You are desperate." He turned to Victoria, sneering. "I am sorry about this. My ex-wife is a little unstable. She just cannot accept that it is over." He looked back at me, his face twisting into a mask of disgust. "What do you want alimony, I told you? You get nothing. Security. Get this trash out of my sight." Isabella giggled, covering her mouth with a manicured hand. She looked me up and down, taking in the white suit but failing to recognize its quality. "Oh my God," Isabella said, her voice high and shrill. "Did you get a job here? Are you on the cleaning crew, babe? Look, she is wearing a suit to try and look professional while she scrubs the toilets. That is so sad." Sylvia shook her head, clutching her purse. "You have no shame. Elena, stalking us all the way to a business meeting. Have you no dignity left?" I said nothing. I just walked to the other end of the table, directly opposite Julian, and placed my hands on the back of the chair. I stared at him with cold, dead eyes. Julian's lawyer, Mr. Kornfeld, seemed to sense something was wrong. He shifted uncomfortably. "Mr. Vance, perhaps we should—" "Shut up," Julian snapped at him. Then he glared at me. "Are you deaf? I said get out." Victoria Sterling stepped forward. She did not yell, but her voice carried the weight of a gavel striking a sounding block. She slammed a thick file folder onto the table with a violence that made everyone jump. "Silence," Victoria commanded. The room went quiet. Julian looked at her, startled by the aggression. "You are confused." "Mr. Vance," Victoria said, her voice dripping with disdain. "You are under the impression that you are here to dictate terms. You are not. You are here to answer for your crimes." "Crimes?" Julian stood up, his face reddening. "I am the founder of Vanguard Energy. You are a fraud," Victoria said calmly. She gestured to me with an open hand. "And you are speaking to the legal owner of Vanguard Energy." Julian froze. He looked at Victoria, then slowly turned his head to look at me. The arrogant smirk faltered, replaced by a flicker of genuine confusion. "What? What did you say?" Julian stammered. "I said," Victoria repeated, enunciating every syllable, "that Elena Vance is the architect, the author, and the rightful owner of every single asset you thought you sold, and as of this morning, she is the one holding your leash." The blood drained from Julian's face so fast it looked like he had been physically struck. He slumped back into his chair, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating, and absolutely delicious. "Mr. Henderson did not waste a second. He tapped a key on his laptop, and the massive screen behind me illuminated the room with a harsh, white light. The text was large enough for even Sylvia, who refused to wear her reading glasses, to see clearly. "Clause 14.2, Henderson read aloud, his voice dry and clinical. "Ownership of proprietary initiative. This states that all compensation is contingent upon the signatory being the sole originator of the intellectual property." The screen shifted. It was no longer a legal document. It was a screenshot of file metadata. "This is the original source code for the Vanguard battery management system." Henderson continued. "As you can see, the file was created 3 years ago. The author is listed as Elena Vance. The last modification was made by Elena Vance. And here are 25 emails sent from Mrs. Vance to you, Mr. Vance, explaining how the system works because you did not understand the basic thermodynamics." Julian gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles turning white. "That proves nothing." She was just typing up my notes. I dictated it to her. "Is that so?" I asked. my voice cutting through his panic. Because I also have the audio recordings of our brainstorming sessions. Julian, the ones where you asked me if solar panels work at night? Isabella let out a small, horrified gasp. Julian whipped his head around to glare at her, but Henderson was already moving on. Clause 33.5, the lawyer announced. The morality and conduct stipulation? The screen flickered again. This time, it played a video. It was grainy security footage, but the image was unmistakable. It showed Julian standing in the doorway of the Ariston, a glass of scotch in his hand, laughing as he kicked my suitcase down the stairs. The audio was crisp. You are trash. Elena, get out. Then, the video cut to a different angle. It was Julian and Isabella in a restaurant booth, weeks before he threw me out, kissing passionately while he handed her a diamond bracelet. This violation of the morality clause, Henderson said, triggers an immediate freeze of all pending assets. Julian stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. He was sweating now, the confidence completely evaporated. But, I signed the contract, he stammered, his eyes darting between Victoria and me. I signed it last week. You promised me $33 million. You cannot just take it back because I have a girlfriend. I took a slow step forward. Sit down, Julian. No, he shouted, pointing a trembling finger at Victoria. She signed it too. It is a binding agreement. I want my money. Actually, I said, keeping my voice terrifyingly calm. You are right about one thing. You did sign, but in your rush to pop the champagne, you did not look at the final page. You did not look at who has to countersign for the funds to be released. I nodded to Henderson. He clicked the remote one last time. The screen displayed the final signature page of the acquisition deal. Julian's signature was there, scrawled and messy. Below it was the line for the Sterling Group representative. It was blank in the scan, but underneath the blank line, the printed text was clear. Authorized for disbursement by Elena Vance, interim CEO of Vanguard Operations. Julian stared at the screen. His mouth hung open. He looked from the screen to me, then back to the screen. That is impossible, he whispered. You are nobody. I am the person you gave power of attorney to, I said. Victoria structured the deal so that the funds are held in escrow. They are only released when the acting CEO signs off on the transition. That CEO is me. And guess what? Julian, I am not signing. You have to, he pleaded, his voice cracking. The deal is done. The deal is dead, I corrected him. I am rejecting the disbursement, which means you do not get $33 million. You get $0. No, Sylvia moaned, clutching her chest. My house, my retirement. But it gets worse, I added, enjoying the look of absolute terror dawning in his eyes. Because you falsely claimed authorship of my work. You have triggered the fraudulent inducement penalty. Clause 51. Henderson displayed the final slide. It showed a calculation in bold red numbers. The penalty for intellectual property fraud is 300% of the contract value. Henderson stated, Mr. Vance, you currently owe Sterling Group $99 million in damages. We will be seizing all personal and corporate assets to begin covering this debt immediately. Julian's legs gave out. He collapsed back into his chair, looking like a man who had just been shot. $99 million, he breathed, his voice barely audible. I do not have $99 million. I know, I said, leaning over the table so I was inches from his face. You do not even have enough for a cab ride home. The silence in the boardroom was broken by the sound of expensive suit fabric stretching as Julian's knees hit the marble floor. The man who had looked down on me from the warmth of the lobby just a week ago was now looking up at me, his eyes wet with terrified tears. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the pathetic desperation of a man watching his life disintegrate. Elena, baby, please, Julian stammered, crawling forward until he was almost touching the hem of my white trousers. I was just under so much pressure. You know how it is, the stress. It made me crazy. But I love you. We can fix this. We can start over. I looked down at him, feeling absolutely nothing. No love, no hate, just the clinical detachment of a CEO looking at a bad investment before I could answer. The sound of heels clicking rapidly against the floor drew everyone's attention. Isabella stood up, shoving her chair back so hard it tipped over. She looked at Julian like he was a contagious disease. I did not know anything about this, she shrieked, her voice echoing off the glass walls. He lied to me. I am just an intern. I am a victim here, Isabella Julian whispered, reaching a hand out to her. Babe, do not touch me, she yelled, recoiling. You are broke. You are in debt, without another look. She grabbed her purse and sprinted out of the room, leaving the door swinging behind her. Elena, darling. Sylvia's voice wavered from the corner. She and Marcus were huddled together, trying to look small. You know we have always loved you like a daughter. We were just confused. We can be a family again. Victoria Sterling did not even look up from her papers. She simply snapped her fingers. 2 large security guards stepped forward, grabbing Sylvia and Marcus by the arms. Get your hands off me! Marcus shouted as they were dragged toward the exit. This is a violation of my rights. Your only right is to remain silent while we process your eviction, Victoria said coldly. When the doors closed, it was just me, Julian, and the wreckage of his ego. I picked up the final document from the stack. It was not a check. It was a writ of asset seizure. I am not going to sue you for the $99 million. Julian, I said softly. Hope flared in his eyes. You are not no, I said, signing the bottom of the page with a flourish, because you will never have that kind of money. Instead, I am exercising the clause to seize all collateral. That includes the penthouse, the cars, and the contents of the safe. I slid the paper toward him. You have 24 hours to vacate the company apartment. I told him, and let me be clear. You take nothing, no suits, no watches, no electronics. You leave exactly how you sent me out into the blizzard, empty-handed. Julian slumped forward, burying his face in his hands, his sobs echoing in the large, empty room. I stood up, buttoned my jacket, and walked out without looking back. 6 months later, the winter snow had melted, giving way to a humid Chicago summer. In a cramped basement apartment on the south side of the city, the air conditioner rattled and wheezed, failing to cool the room that smelled of boiled cabbage and mildew. Julian sat at the wobbly kitchen table, counting out crumpled dollar bills and loose change. He wore a faded t-shirt that had seen better days. His phone buzzed with a notification from the food delivery app he worked for. It was a $2 tip for biking 5 miles in the rain. Is that all you brought home? Sylvia yelled from the sofa, where she lay surrounded by piles of laundry. How am I supposed to buy my medicine with pocket change? You are useless. Julian. Totally useless. Julian closed his eyes, letting the insults wash over him. He had no energy to fight back. He checked his social media feed for a distraction. A post from Isabella popped up. It was a screenshot of a tabloid article titled "The Gold Digger Who Lost It All." She had tried to latch onto a 70-year-old oil tycoon, but the internet never forgets. The comments section was brutal. She was a pariah. Julian swiped past it and saw a news headline that made his stomach drop. Phoenix Logistics, formerly Vanguard Energy, unveils revolutionary green battery grid. The thumbnail showed a woman standing in front of a sleek, modern logo. She looked radiant, powerful, and unstoppable. High above the city, on the 45th floor of the Sterling Tower, I sat in my corner office. The view was breathtaking. The city lights twinkled like diamonds spread out on black velvet. I took a sip of hot chamomile tea and looked at the framed document on my desk. It was not the sale contract. It was my nameplate. Elena Vance, CEO. I had renamed the company Phoenix because it had risen from the ashes of Julian's failure and my own despair. We were profitable. We were ethical. And most importantly, we were mine. I turned my chair to face the window, watching the traffic flow like a river of light far below. I did not need a husband to validate me. I did not need a $33 million check to feel worthy. I had signed the most important contract of my life the day I walked out of that boardroom. I had signed a contract with freedom. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I really hope you enjoyed Elena's journey from heartbreak to triumph. Please comment down below where you are listening from. I would love to know how far this story has traveled. Don't forget to subscribe to the Mia Revenge Stories channel. Like this video and smash that hype button so we can share more powerful stories like this with the world.